मार दो, मारने के लिए तैयार है। इतनी इज्जत गिराओगे क्या? हम अपनी मान सम्मान की लड़ाई लड़ रहे हैं और वो फिर धक्के मार रहा है चेस्ट पे लड़कियों कैसे वो पुलिस वाला। इसी दिन देखने के लिए मेडल लेके आना, तो मैं चाहूंगी कि देश का कोई खिलाड़ी मेडल ही ना लेके आए कभी।
I'm very sad to see, the discourse and, it getting to the stage. It's basically a sign of frustration. How many athletes have you heard speak? We have a lot of athletes in this country, and normally one would think, all right, this is somebody from your community. It's a no-brainer, but it doesn't happen. In terms of sport, the most important thing in my mind is for athletes to feel safe. Not a one-off. I'm not just talking about India, I'm talking about the rest of the world. Not just wrestling, all sports. I guarantee you that, it's an epidemic.
Rather unfortunate events unfolding in Delhi where the wrestlers continue to protest, alleging sexual abuse by the Wrestling Federation of India chief Brij Bhushan. No action has still been taken against him, although an FIR has been registered. But really, where does it leave our athletes, and how do you safeguard their rights and themselves? Well, joining me today is six-time Olympian Shiva Keshavan. He is the face of India's Winter Olympics. And he joins me in just a moment to take me through really the events and how we can look at protecting the athletes. I mean, it's a really sad reflection of what is really going on. But before I move ahead, a quick reminder: do like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Jyotsna, Mohan.
When you hear an Olympian saying, "Let me just return my medal," what is the point of this medal? What do you feel?
It's very sad to hear and very sad to see, the discourse and, it getting to the stage. It's basically a sign of frustration. What else can I do? It just points to a lack of resolution of the issues, a lack of discussion about the issues. So, this frustration builds up and it spills out on the streets, and which basically shows that, we need to, really put those systems in place and, really go back to the drawing board and see where we're facing our athletes. And this is in the context, by the way, in this specific case, we're talking about a state that has traditionally had so many issues with gender equality, so that is one thing to put in context and to see that, they're leading the charge in speaking about this subject. Number two, in sport, in Olympic sport, most of our success, or a lot of our success, has come from women, and you put that into context. So what all women in India have to go through in the workplace, in the sports field, which is a kind of a workplace in itself, and how can we, understand that, despite the system, despite the general prevailing culture, how many families are eager to see their daughters, go out and, stay in training camps, in this kind of a situation. So it's alarming, and it needs to be really, all these things need to be spoken about. It needs to come to light, and we need to put systems in place.
Is there any framework whatsoever?
Well, there is a framework in place now. There's a lot of stakeholders in this, okay, in terms of sports governance, because sports governance is not so straightforward. You don't have one hierarchical pyramidal structure. You have the government, you have the Sports Authority of India, you have the national sports federations that are supposed to be operating with some kind of autonomy, because autonomy in sport is also very important. You have the Olympic Association, you have the international governing bodies, and you have the IOC. So all these come together, and and each of them, and then of course you have the laws. You have the Supreme Court, and you have the laws of the land. So, but within the organization that is working, you have to put in mechanisms that work in a semi-formal capacity to resolve the situation, because before it becomes a legal issue. And even before that, how do you put systems in place to protect, prevent, this kind of situations. In terms of sport, the most important thing in my mind is for athletes to feel safe. The psychological safety, is a concept that lies at the base of high performance sport. these are all factors that even contribute to performance, apart from rights. Okay, so internationally there is something called the Global Declaration of Athletes' Rights and Responsibilities. That was an athletes-led initiative the world over. It's a consultation process that started in 2018, where thousands of athletes, international level athletes, were consulted, and this whole charter has been framed by the IOC and by the athletes organizations active in the IOC, and it is important to implement this. Right now, the IOC is also, of course, pushing for it. It's going to become compulsory sooner rather than later. So that is one part. And then there is the federations part as well, because each federation is supposed to be having an ethics committee, is supposed to be having a protection of harassment committee. It's supposed to be having all these things. But how is this actually implemented, and how much is just there for show is questionable, and who's there to enforce this? So we really need to look at things under the lens. And right now, if the court is taking these kind of cases up, if you look at a large number of federations, I wouldn't be surprised to see a small percentage abiding by the rules which are already there. By the way, you don't have to invent any new rules. They're there, you just need to implement them.
So you speak about the ethics committee and all of that, but really, how much of a representation does it have from your fraternity? In
terms of the Olympic governance, right now, for the first, there's been a huge overarching, reform in the governance of the Indian Olympic Association. As a result of all this, we have, I think, about 20% of the Indian Olympic Association now is made up of athletes, right? So there are a lot of athletes in it. When you talk, we have an athletes commission, which has a seat on the executive board in the IOA, has a seat on the General Assembly in the IOA, and athletes representatives are generally put on various commissions and committees. So, and this is starting to take place right now at the Indian Olympic Association level. But the same thing needs to happen in the sports federation level as well. So I'm sure the Wrestling Federation of India, to be recognized, they would have to have an athletes commission, they would have to have an ethics commission, and they would have to have a protection of harassment and abuse panel. But from what I know, they're not really compliant, and that's a big issue, and how we can take it to the next step and make sure these things are effective.
Doesn't your battle get derailed in a sense when people come across like PT Usha, for instance? When she went to visit the wrestlers, she just turned around and said that you cut it out, basically. You're spoiling the image of the country. That's a narrative that's being parroted. Where does it leave the athletes who are really fighting the right fight when there is resistance from within their own fraternity?
And I've not really heard her say the words that they are indisciplined or that they are disrespecting the country. So I don't think that was her full intention. But I think in a context like this, somebody at a position of leadership should really understand, should approach this subject through empathy and through solidarity with people who are suffering. And that becomes the starting point, because that's the reason we are here as athletes, because we've been through a lot of these things. And I won't be surprised if a large number of women athletes in India have gone through this kind of a situation already in their personal lives. So I would ideally want to see a lot more women athletes coming out, sharing their, giving their voice, sharing their experiences. And this is what gives power to a movement like this. We had the Me Too movement in the West. What was it about? It was about everybody coming and speaking up and saying, me too, I went through this as well, right? So it lends that credibility to a movement that, unfortunately, what I'm seeing is, there's a lot of efforts to discredit this movement, to complicate it with other issues, and it shouldn't be. And the image of the country in the world is tarnished because of such evils, not because of protesting against a problem. It's because of the problem itself. And let's look at it in a wholesome way. Let's look at it in a long-term perspective. where do we want to be in the world? We want to be a leader, right? So we have to act like it. We can't, be skirting issues and, trying to present, a rosy picture while, really something else is festering.
I think one of the biggest unfortunate part of this culture, sporting culture, is the fact that federations are all run by and large by politicians, and that's where the resistance comes. That's where the resistance is coming currently when it comes to the wrestlers as well. It's all about the BJP MP who's the WFAI chief. So the pushback comes, right? I mean, at all points. Who blink?
In general, there's this principle called the autonomy of sport. Okay, sport to be free from political influence, religious, economic, cultural, all these guys. Sports has to be a universal, no matter what section of society you come from, what political, fraternity you come from. And in order to keep this autonomy of sport, it is important to have, to keep such figures away. Because what happens, obviously, is that, if you have, a political group of people that is controlling, some kind of a sporting body, then just because you have to protect your political group, the repercussions are being felt on the sports field. So this is something that should not happen. Harassment and abuse, all these things have a lot to do with power. Okay, how much power do the people who are our immediate, supervisors or who are governing our daily lives, how much power do they have over us? And this concentrates power a lot in the hands of a few people. If you have the political power, you have, the absolute oversight of sport. So it's a dangerous mix. So which is why transparency is important, which is why autonomy of sport is important, which is why having more athletes in the decision-making process is important, so we can feel safe and we can start speaking about things. Many times what happens, athletes are included, but they still don't have a voice because they are still, subjugated to this power, right? And that is in itself, that is a big. And what message do we want to send to families who are, thinking of letting their children, their daughters, their athletes go and participate in and live in this environment? So there's a lot of cleaning up over here to do. I don't think many of the current sports administrators even realize, because they are so disconnected with these concepts, that many people think that, I'm doing the right thing, right? This guy needs this area needs some tough love. It needs firm hand. I have to beat the people. I have to bully the people because otherwise it doesn't work. No, it's not that way. These are pretty, archaic concepts. It's now we have to do things with education. We have to, and sports becomes a conduit for this. All those people who are all, the stars, who are sitting right now on Dharna, they have a huge following, and people idolize them. People want to see how this issue is going to affect them, to then draw their conclusions on how they should live their lives. So, which is why this is a very important thing, and it's been taken cognizance of at the highest levels, including the Supreme Court. So it's interesting times, and these people are fighting a tough battle, and I'm sure it's going to have much wider consequences. It's not just for themselves.
Yeah, I hope. You mentioned the fact that a lot of them are subjugated in a sense. So, do you come across a lot of athletes, former athletes, who would want to speak but would rather keep quiet?
We have a lot of athletes in this country, and normally one would think, all right, this is somebody from your community. It's a no-brainer, right? You're going to support each other. But it doesn't happen. Why doesn't it happen? Because there's no feeling of safety for people to come out. There's no policy to protect whistleblowers. We've seen reports of committees that are not handling information that is supposed to be privileged and private in a responsible manner. So we're not really equipped to deal with such things if we don't have the right systems, the professionals in place. So we need to build systems, to filter out all these things and various layers of protection for athletes. We can't, go to the Supreme Court every time there's something wrong. And at a certain point, you have to fix responsibility. So each organization has a head. If something's wrong with the organization As a head, you have to take moral responsibility, and that's how the system works. Otherwise, it's just about who's shouting the loudest online, who has the biggest muscle. So that's not how an evolved sports system or any system should work.
Like you said, the loudest voices keep going. I mean, it has been going on now for more than 10 days, and there's been no action. It's been going on for 3 months actually, and no action has been taken. And do you actually honestly think that mobilizing support will help in changing mindsets when it comes to taking on the politics?
Many of these people, they operate in gray areas, in areas in the dark, where nobody knows what's really going on. Having the courage to come out and speak about something that's deeply uncomfortable and it's demeaning and belittling in our society, the way our society is structured, warrants respect. Many people could have been quiet, looked at the short-term gain, maybe taken some money, and that's one way to resolve it. But you don't create solutions like this. I mean, human rights, unfortunately, have always been hard fought in throughout history, right? So this is and I feel that also this is a good role that sport is playing, because it is through exposure, through understanding that what kind of systems are in place in other countries, how things are evolving, we are also able to implement certain systems. And it's not that it doesn't happen elsewhere in the world. It happens all over. It happens in the most advanced sporting nations. But often it is some instances that deeply impact the way we look at things, and you start putting systems in place. I really hope that at least from the sports point of view, this will set a precedent in creating systems in place. And because Supreme Court has spoken about it, the International Wrestling Federation has spoken about it, the IOC has hinted about it, the IOA president herself has started talking about it. So I hope that this leads to some systemic change.
The initiatives that you've been taking, when whether it's the Athletes Commission, the Olympian Commission, is it working as per what you had hoped?
Well, I mean, as an athlete, I've always you want results, you want them fast. Sometimes it doesn't work that way. It takes time. It's a process. It's not about convincing 2, 3, 4 people. You have to convince everybody across the board to participate in the system, because it works only when that overall participation is there. And to bring about change, you generally have to go out of your comfort zone. And it's difficult to make that stand, especially when you have vested interests in place. People will always question your motives. Are you doing it out of some of your own private agenda? There are a lot of complications, but we have made progress. There's sure and steady steps. We do have an Athletes Commission right now, which is working, which has a seat on the table, which has votes, and now we have to also realize that the new constitution, all this reform process gives us power, right? But unless you unless you assert this power, you assert this responsibility, nothing's going to happen. So things are changing, but it's a wider mindset and cultural shift to understand that you can stand up to authority, you can speak. The most important thing is the truth. So that gives you strength. And often I understand people who are currently competing, they're still very much under the influence of powerful figures. So it is difficult to do that. But I think as athletes, we have a responsibility to a larger community. And if you want to change, you have to break the chain.
Which is why all the more, a little bit of of respect for the wrestlers, because some of them are still competing, aren't they? And they've got Asian Games coming. But, a question for you, Shiva, is it easier to train than it is to bring about this change?
Training is easy, right? It's what, especially for athletes, it's what we do. It's what gives us satisfaction. We're working towards a goal. I wish everybody could, live in such a space where things are defined for you. You know what you're supposed to be doing, and you can dedicate yourself for that. Even when you're in that environment, there are other issues, there are other things you have to deal with. Okay, the relationship with other athletes, the relationship to your coach, the relationship to your federation, and all this unfortunately is part of training. I've had to spend a lot more time than I would have ever wished on these kind of things. I would have much preferred to spend my days training and getting better, but no, I had to go and get signatures. I had to please people to make sure that my file is being sent, that we're getting a uniform when we are going for a competition, that we're reaching on the right date for the event or for the training. So yeah, I mean there's a lot of things that I wish that we can that could have been different while I was an athlete. But since I have that awareness while being an athlete, since I've been through it, I think I'm in a right position to give that perspective. As an athletes commission, we are not an independent body in the sense that we are not a separate organization. We are part of the IOA, right? To give the perspective of the athletes to those in power. Okay, that's our role. Okay, and even those in power, they have to understand the utility of having an athletes commission, because if you don't have a dialogue with the athletes commission, you don't know what's happening on the ground. You don't know what's in the heart and the minds of athletes. So these are systems that are now in place in theory, but we have to understand our role and understand that we are not against each other. We are going towards the same goal. We'll have the goal that all right, India has to shine internationally in sport, right? We want to be a sport superpower. We want to win the medals. So when we have the same goal, why do we think that we have to compete against each other? For powerful people, they have to understand that you have to share the power. It's a democracy, right? And then you cannot get into sports and try to be a dictator, and the laws now don't allow you to do that. You can just have 2 terms, then you have to go. Hopefully, all these systems help in the long run to stop this kind of a cozy space of operation for dubious people in positions of power.
Do women support other women? Women who've played earlier, who are former athletes, who are in a position to help current athletes?
To answer your question directly, I don't think enough women are speaking up about it. Understandably so, because it's the primary people who are facing the crux of this problem. So it is difficult to break out of it. But women need to stand up for each other and need to say me too. And you understand how how this was successful all over the world. It should be in India as well. And however, it's not just women. Okay, it's we're all in this together. I mean, I've independently of who's right, who's wrong, what comes out of this whole thing, I have a lot of respect for all the men who've been speaking actively on this, because we say behind every successful man there's a woman, but it also works the other way around, right? Why not? We have to enable each other, and ultimately the people who get harassed and abused, yes, there's primarily women, but it happens to men as well. And especially in positions like this, when there's really powerful people, it doesn't really matter who you are. You have to bend, and you have to really adapt to what whims and fancies of people that don't really have much idea of what they should be doing. So it's for everybody to come up and speak.
As journalists, Shiva, we've heard lots of stories, lots of rumors, about the seedy side of the sports corridors, but the wrestling issue and what they allege, it's not a one-off, is it?
It's not a one-off. It's not. I'm not just talking about India. I'm talking about the rest of the world. Not just wrestling, all sports. I guarantee you that it's an epidemic. Okay, because of the fact that we cannot speak about things that are disturbing us, mentally, and that generally has it also has repercussions physically and to your body. So we need to create this environment of psychological safety. I mean, it is something that we know. We study this, and anybody who has any idea about how high performance teams works know that it's one of the fundamental needs that drives performance. So I'm not even looking at a human rights the point of view. Just by looking at a performance point of view, you know that you need to have a free and fair relationship with people in power, right? And this is one of the main problems. And I hope that by more and more athletes that are right now coming into sports administration, sports administrators are a lot more approachable. Okay, which is a big thing. It's a big shift. The fact that the IOA president went over there and spoke to the athletes is not something that would have happened probably earlier, because athletes were considered a different category altogether. So things are changing, and sometimes while things are changing, we have to really hit new low slowly. All events like these are making a difference.
Like you said, these new lows happen. It means a little bit more when it comes to the Indian context, right? I mean, we are not a typically sporting society, a sporting culture. We're just waking up in a sense to pushing our children out to play different sports apart from cricket. And then events like this happen, and you can expect rural families to say, forget it, just sit at home. I mean, you'd actually expect it across the board.
Well, we let's say that we are a developing sports nation. Okay, we have huge potential, and the biggest factor for us to realize our potential is to use our demographic advantage. It means to create a safe environment where parents allow their children to go and play and to go and be part of this world. And that is the most important thing, I think, right now, because access to sport is much bigger than winning medals. We're creating a society which is based on certain values, certain principles. Where do we go from here? I think, first of all, we need to show solidarity with victims. Okay, that is the most important thing, because the first thing in anybody's playbook is to discredit people, and to obfuscate issues with other things that are irrelevant to this particular context. So first thing is to respect people who are coming out, don't belittle them, okay, and support. And if you have something that you can relate to, come out, and speak about this thing. So we have to get these things out in the open to understand that there is a problem, right? The protest and the words that we've heard from our wrestling stars who are protesting at Jantar Mantar has basically brought this problem out in the open, and that's the first step. Now that we know that there is a problem, let's not sweep it under the carpet. Let's take it head on, and let's put systems in place, or let's empower the systems that we thought were there, which were working, but actually aren't. So. First of all, I mean, athletes' representation and protection from harassment and abuse in sports. I think there are two things that are going to be priorities for the Athletes Commission, and it's something that we'll be following up on very closely.
Wishing you and all the athletes with you who are working hard, to kind of safeguard and protect the athletes. Wishing you guys all the all the best, Shiva, because it's a uphill task, though. Knowing how things are run in this country and the kind of resistance that we are seeing actually to the athletes, to the wrestlers' protest. I hope it's a turning point and things look up from now. But no battle was fought easily anyway, right?
Yeah, and thank you and as part of the media for again putting this into our conversations, because that's important to speak about it and to recognize that a problem is there.